In business, things rarely fall apart all at once. They usually start with a small tremor, something so quiet most people overlook it. And then, almost before you realize it, that little tremor grows into a shift big enough to reshape an entire industry. That's exactly what we're watching unfold with John Deere right now. The company found itself reacting to comments made about a potential 200% tariff on equipment brought into the United States. Now, you don't have to be an economist to understand what a tariff that size can do. It changes the math instantly. And when the math changes, the decisions change right along with it. Deere had already begun moving parts of its production from Iowa to Mexico. And when a business relocates even a small portion of its operations, it isn't just chasing cheaper labor or different regulations. It's trying to protect the long term survival of the enterprise. People forget that companies, especially iconic American ones, aren't just steel and paint. They're ecosystems. They take decades to build and seconds to damage. When early 2025 policy decisions triggered higher tariffs, Deere saw an unexpected hit, close to $500 million on the horizon. 100 million disappeared from one quarter alone. The stock fell nearly 30% year over year. And when a company that has been a symbol of American stability for generations starts laying off hundreds of workers, that's not noise. That's signal. Analysts noticed too. They pointed out that manufacturers across the sector were bleeding hundreds of millions in response to the same policies. Deere warned investors that total exposure could hit 600 million before the year ended. And let me tell you, when a company that famous for its predictability starts using numbers like that, you know something fundamental has shifted. What we were looking at wasn't just a bad quarter, it was a turning point. Now, in my line of work, I've always said when the foundation stops feeling solid, you don't stand still. You look for firmer ground. Deer's situation rippled outward like a stone dropped into a quiet pond. Small towns felt it first. Places where farmers' equipment purchases determine loan approvals, land values, and the stability of entire counties. When farmers start delaying purchases, banks start hesitating. And when bankers hesitate, you know confidence is leaving the room. Dealers in the US and Canada began reporting cancellations. Entire order books went silent. Farmers held on to older machinery longer than usual, not because they wanted to, but because uncertainty is the most expensive risk a family business can take. Meanwhile, companies like Case IH began cutting staff too. And bit by bit, the entire sector entered what I'd call a freeze. Not a collapse, just a stillness, a refusal of the market to move until someone explains what the rules will be tomorrow. On top of that, imported components got more expensive. Tariffs do that. Manufacturers started considering price increases of 2 to 4%, and higher prices in a hesitant market don't encourage people to open their wallets. The biggest problem wasn't supply. It wasn't demand. It was predictability, or the lack of it. Throughout 2025, tariff announcements didn't arrive on a clear schedule. Some came through press releases, others through off the cuff remarks that immediately affected millions of dollars worth of decisions. You simply can't run a capital intensive business that way, not when production cycles stretch years into the future. Then came the comment about a 200% tariff if Deere shifted production out of Iowa. It never became policy, but the message alone forced boardrooms to recalculate risk. Factories had to constantly adjust staffing, schedules, and procurement plans. It's hard to build anything enduring when the ground keeps moving under your feet. And so Deere did what smart businesses do when one door closes. They look for another that's still open. Canada became that door. Lower electricity prices, stable policy, and a growing manufacturing ecosystem made several Canadian provinces look attractive. The Langley facility in British Columbia evolved into a global center for tracked forestry equipment. And you don't make a move like that if you think you'll be packing up next year. That's long-term planning. That's commitment. Across Canada, Deere employs more than 6,000 people and supports a massive dealer network. Provincial governments, especially in British Columbia, have encouraged growth across forestry and agricultural supply chains. Add the fact that Canada accounts for nearly percent of American agricultural equipment exports, and you start to see a partnership where both sides benefit immensely. What emerged was a multi-pillar model, a strategy I've always believed in. Don't rely on one anchor when you can build three. Manufacturers across the world are now doing the same thing, spreading risk, building cross border networks, and choosing regions where long term planning isn't disrupted every time the political winds shift. Canada's stability, infrastructure, and alignment under USMCA have turned it into a prime location for business, especially for companies that still want proximity to the US market without inheriting its volatility. Meanwhile, on the other side of the continent, Mexico, the star of North America's nearshoring story, hit turbulence. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper cut exports significantly. Deals paused. Momentum slowed. Even the Tesla Gigafactory, the symbol of Mexico's new industrial identity, was put on hold. Small workshop owners in Nuevo Leon felt it most. These folks had built their hopes on the region's industrial boom. Some machines sat idle for months. And while things are slowly improving, business owners have a saying I've heard all my life: don't celebrate until the check clears. They're still waiting for those checks. Mexico is working to strengthen domestic supply chains through initiatives like Made in Nuevo Leon and national programs under Plan Mexico. But integrating small producers into global supply networks has never been simple. Volume, consistency, delivery speed, these are tough bars to clear. The USMCA review next year adds even more uncertainty. Mexican officials are pushing for equal treatment on steel and aluminum so their goods can enter the US without new restrictions, and they're right to push. Stability is currency in today's global economy. That brings us to the heart of the matter. In business, I've always said that predictability is worth more than genius. You give me a stable, boring environment, and I'll show you an economy that grows decade after decade. Today, companies are learning that lesson the hard way. Manufacturing is shifting toward regions where the rules don't change overnight, where investments can mature, where long-term thinking is rewarded rather than punished. This isn't just about Deere. It's about the future map of global manufacturing. Which countries will offer the stability that businesses need? Which ones will force companies to reconsider their plans? And who will adapt fast enough to shape the next era of economic power? In the end, markets always return to the same truth. Businesses go where the ground is steady. And the places that offer that stability will define the next decade.